Hello, everyone. Welcome into another video here on the Guilty as Charged podcast YouTube channel. We've been doing that free agency series here on the channel, talking about all the free agent possibilities and more on bold breakdowns. But today, I wanted to do something a little bit different and kind of give my review / takeaways from Tom Telesco's Indianapolis Combine press conference yesterday. Does this every year, right before free agency, right before the franchise tag window, and people ask him some questions. So let's talk about some of his answers, and I'm going to play a little game while I respond to some of these called buy or sell, whether I buy or sell what Telesco's selling. And let's just get right into some of the most pressing comments from yesterday. So the first thing I actually want to talk about was covered by Sports Illustrated's Nick Cothrell in a write-up of this article, in a write-up about Tom Telesco's press conference, I should say. And this first quote comes from over here. Tom Telesco said yesterday, quote, "This year we can attack a little bit differently because we do have a lot of cap space and we do have a quarterback on a rookie deal. The goal every year is the same. The goal is to challenge and compete for a championship." I think there was actually a lot of buzz from Telesco's January presser when he talked. I think someone asked him about the Super Bowl window during Herbert's rookie contract, and he said something along the lines of, "We don't believe in Super Bowl windows," right? Which is kind of saying we have to compete every year, regardless of how good the roster is, how bad the roster is. We're always going to be competing for that Super Bowl title, or at least that's our front office approach, I should say. So, as far as the quarterback on the rookie deal thing, I never thought Telesco didn't know that. I mean, obviously, it was very clear that he knew, hey, this is an inequality that multiple teams have taken advantage of in the NFL. It is a market inefficiency, right? The Eagles, when they had Carson Wentz, the Seahawks, when they had Russell Wilson, won their Super Bowl, Ravens before they paid Joe Flacco, Chiefs before they paid Mahomes, right? Like, this is a very real thing that's happened for years and years and years. So obviously, I buy that Telesco is seriously considering Justin Herbert's rookie contract in free agency because he kind of has to. It's the reason you have $50 million and probably won't have as much money when free agency comes up in 3-4 years from now, when Justin Herbert's going to be making 50 plus million in average annual value, right? That's just the reality. So I completely buy what Tom Telesco said there. Let's go to another quote actually from the same article. This was, of course, Sports Illustrated's Nicholas Cothrell, the new guy from Charger Report. If you want to check his stuff out, this is a quote from Telesco. "It's not rocket science. We've got to protect the quarterback and make sure there's enough weapons, and that's what we're going to do this offseason. The focus can't just be on one side of the ball. It's got to be on both. I want to make sure on offense we don't take a step back." I mean, that's a pretty not really interesting quote. Like, obviously, the attitude of the GM should be upgrading the offense and upgrading the defense every year. But I think we've been focusing so much on the defense in free agency in the draft that, obviously it's, bottom of the league in terms of run defense, pass defense, whatever stat you want to look at, that maybe we've been so focused on that we haven't considered, okay, well, what if we do go for some big acquisitions on the offense as well, right? Whether that's a guy for right tackle, another receiver, or a running back too to complement Eckler, right? So those can be big things, even if they're not quite the big things that maybe the defense does need in terms of shelling out some of that money. So I do buy that comment from Telesco as well. He's just kind of going to say what he's going to say. Obviously, upgrading the offense and defense is important, but I do believe there will be some aggressiveness from him towards the offensive side of the ball as well, even though mainly on the podcast, I feel like we've kind of been focusing on the defense and how much that needs to improve. That brings us to one Mike Williams, I should say. And he is a free agent right now. He has not been franchise tagged to this point. And as Nick Cothrell, talks about here, is coming off of a season that included 76 catches for 1,146 yards, right? 9 touchdowns. Due for a big payday. I don't know if there was a immediate Mike Williams quote, but this was actually from Gilbert Manzano when asked about it. Manzano said, "Not many news items from Telesco's combine presser, but here's what he said on wide receiver Mike Williams regarding a possible extension or using the franchise tag. Quote, no updates right now. I talked about after the season what an impact he makes on our football team." So this is March 2nd when I'm recording this. The deadline is March 8th for Mike Williams to be tagged. We'll see if he's tagged or not. I think it'll be really interesting, especially in comparison to the 2020 Hunter Henry franchise tag. My gut feeling is that Mike Williams ultimately does receive the tag. I do believe Telesco cares about that chemistry, and sort of, how that's going to go in terms of asset protection, right? Unless, a golden opportunity that he can't pass up comes up, say, for example, Devontae Adams. Not saying that's going to happen, but unless something like that came up, I really do think the Chargers still retain Mike Williams, unless, there's just something that they can't pass up that would be, a clear upgrade over him. Not many of those in this free agency class in general, which Mike Williams is clearly one of the best, 2-3 receivers, in this class for free agency. So I don't buy or sell that one because Telesco didn't say anything, but I do still buy that Mike Williams will be back via the franchise via a 4-year extension as well, potentially. This was regarding Ryan Ficken. Tom Telesco emphasized that new special teams coordinator Ryan Ficken will be heavily involved in bringing back pieces to improve that unit. So I'm going to buy this comment from Telesco, and if I'm going to tell you what I'm selling after this comment, I will sell the idea that all of Hopkins, Overton, Long, and Roberts are back. I do think there will be some change depending on what Ryan Ficken wants. Probably bring Hopkins back, and I think we've talked about this last podcast probably, that Hopkins is probably the most likely one to come back when we did our free agency simulation. But the other ones, I don't know. It's going to depend on what Ryan Ficken wants. Obviously there's been rumors about Cordero Patterson that have kind of floated around. If they want to add Cordero Patterson instead of Andre Roberts, I wouldn't be surprised if that's kind of like a Ficken decision. Also keep in mind Staley's connections to Cordero Patterson as well. So that doesn't surprise me that he will be heavily involved, as we kind of know Darius Swinton was pretty involved last year as well. Didn't work out considering, the whole KJ Hill and Vizcaino thing, but he was involved last year as well. So I do think the special teams coordinator will clearly have a say in personnel decisions, and that's kind of what you get from Telesco's comments. This is from another quote, Tom Telesco, on the lack of a reliable running back 2 behind Austin Eckler. We need more from that spot on our offense to continue to evolve. Yeah, I mean, pretty obvious. And I think that's even more obvious now that Justin Jackson is probably leaving the Chargers, and that you're going to be put in a situation, unless you sign someone in free agency, where Larry Roundtree and Joshua Kelly are going to be RB2 and RB3 in some order. So that will be interesting. But yeah, as far as needing to find more from that spot in our offense and more explosiveness to take our offense to the next level, I think it's kind of interesting you drafted Joshua Kelly and Larry Roundtree there, Telesco. So I think the disappointment is also on my side as well with Tom Telesco making that draft pick, but it is funny to hear him continue to talk about we need more from that spot in our offense after he spent 2 day 3 picks 2 years in a row on running backs that are bad, but and running backs that anyone could have told you were overdrafted and bad that he still went for anyway. Miss Khalil Herbert. Anyway, the next quote is from Tom Telesco regarding the tight end room. And I actually think this one was a little bit interesting. He said that he liked what their young tight ends were able to do last year, but added that the room may not be complete right now. Also said it's unclear if Jared Cook will be back or not. I do buy that Jared Cook won't be back. As far as the room being complete, I think that could clearly indicate that Tom Telesco might head in another direction in free agency. Obviously, we think that David Njoku is probably going back to the Browns. But there are options out there that aren't Jared Cook if you want to go after Zach Ertz. Steven mentioned Rob Gronkowski last podcast, which I don't think will happen, but there are guys you can go get in tight end free agency who are a little older, probably on a 1, 2, 3 year deal that is kind of going to be here for the short term, as opposed to overpaying some young guy. But yeah, I still do believe the general structure of the tight end room will be Donald Parham playing a bigger role as a pass catcher, Trey McKitty playing a bigger role as a blocker. And then I think you could probably pencil in like a free agent tight end one who's a pass catcher. Like, I don't think Donald Parham just elevates to that role this season as much as I would like to see it. I do think they would want a year or two of like, as I mentioned earlier, like a Zach Ertz, Rob Gronkowski kind of thing, where it's like this guy has control of it right now. And then, later, if Donald Parham does blossom into that tight end one that you want, then, that kind of becomes a situation in and of itself and you can move on from that guy that's tight end one. Anyway, I do buy that Jared Cook ultimately won't be back unless they just kind of have him as like an emergency backup option because they can't find someone in free agency or the draft. But I also wouldn't be shocked either if they went into the draft with basically their free agent room or sorry, their roster tight end room being just McKitty and Parham. But I do think they'll sign some other guy, whether that's re-signing Steven Anderson or going after a legitimate tight end one. Yeah. GM Tom Telesco reiterated that they aren't solely focused on solving the defense. We have to take another step up on offense this year. Yeah, we already talked about that one. Okay. Tom Telesco said where Asante Samuel Jr. plays in the future will be up to the coaching staff, but added that he is confident that he can play wherever we need him to. I sell this comment because it means nothing. Of course, you drafted Asante Samuel Jr. in the second round, and you better be confident that he can play wherever you need him to, whether that's the outside or the slot or wherever the coaching staff plans on putting him. But like, come on, like I hesitate to say this because the Staley defense is so complex and confusing sometimes, but it's pretty obvious they're kind of going to stick him into that Chris Harris role, at least in my opinion, and then work from that. Obviously, he will be playing kind of all over the field, but that just feels like the role that makes the most sense for him, while the team, on the other side, tries to go find another outside corner to be CB2 next to Michael Davis, whether that's through the draft or potentially through free agency as well. This is from Tom Telesco. Everything starts up front. It starts with rushing the passer. I saw this quote as well because it's like, thanks, John Madden. That was really fun and obvious. Yeah, I mean, of course, this probably could be taken as a reference to Uchenna Nwosu, or, a lot of Chargers fans have talked about Von Miller as potential guys to add on the edge. Chargers weren't too great in pass rush pressure this year outside of Joey Bosa. So clearly they probably will be looking for an upgrade. Uchenna Nwosu obviously came on hot later in the year, but I do still think they kind of look for maybe some of the bigger splash names in free agency at the edge position, given how much value Telesco has shown to it before. But not a whole lot of takeaways from this Telesco press conference. I hope you liked my little game of buy or sell. But I think Tyler actually summed it up pretty nicely here. The only real takeaways, again, anything can be smokescreen, like Tyler said. They are that Telesco feels they can attack free agency differently this year because of cap space. So I do think the Chargers ultimately will be aggressive there, despite Tom Telesco's January press conference comments where he, sort of pooped on the concept of a Super Bowl window. And I do think another quote that stands out is that the tight end room isn't quite complete, depending on whether that means bringing Jared Cook back or bringing in another guy to be tight end one. That's sort of going to be the interesting thing to watch. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys thought of Tom Telesco's press conference in the comments down below. If you watched it, what do you want him to do this offseason? Leave a comment below and let me know. As always, love you guys and bolt up.